thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. It truly is wonderful to be here on this occasion. I live in central London and I ride the tube very often. And the great thing is I'm 61. And when you get to 60, they give you a free Oyster card. It's just amazing. I tell you, that thing is like, I use it every day of my life. And I ride anywhere I like around the city without ever paying. I think it's dreadful, really, that I should have that opportunity. But I could have done with it when I was 25 and trying to set up a charity, and I was really skint and I had to walk everywhere. But anyway, I ride on the tube. And you always, you know, whenever you get on the tube, in the morning you get a Metro. If you're on it in the evening, you get the Evening Standard. And about 3 years ago, I was riding the tube, and I picked up the Metro, you know, that was there. And this story was there about a woman called Naomi. And I was so taken by this story that I researched it to find out if it was actually true. And it was. And here's Naomi's story. Naomi woke up one morning, and she was 15. And she woke up and she went, as she always did, to the bathroom. And she cleaned her teeth and looked into the bathroom mirror eventually. And as she looked into the bathroom mirror, she screamed. And she ran out the bathroom, screaming, sobbing. Then she thought she must be dreaming. So she took another shot at this, and she made her way back into the bathroom. And she dared to look into the mirror again. And she screamed again. And as she screamed, she ran out of the bathroom, up the corridor, and at that point, an 11-year-old boy came running towards her and threw his arms round her and said, "Mum, Mum, what's wrong?" And she screamed again. Naomi later said this: "I can't believe what happened. I went to sleep a 15-year-old, a brazen 15-year-old on the edge of getting A stars in my GCSEs. And I woke up a 32-year-old, unemployed, single mum, living on a council estate in debt." What had actually happened was Naomi had suffered what they call global transient amnesia. The stress of her life had become so much that something had happened in her brain that night. You can look this up, it's a famous story, and had blotted out a decade and a half of her life. She said, "I can't believe I went to sleep as a brazen 15-year-old with the world at my feet, and I woke up a 32-year-old lost." I checked out whether that story was true. It is true. Because what fascinated me most about the story is that's what actually happens to endless young people without global transient amnesia. Young people end up, as you know, because we're all involved with young people, almost sleepwalking into a future that they never hoped for, they didn't long for, they didn't dream for, they didn't plan for. They looked somewhere else, but ended up in a different place. And as Jim has already said in such an articulate way, that's because of the deeper rootedness of life. I was reflecting on the fact, I live in central London, and I go running rather slowly, and I ran along the South Bank, you know, and you can run all the way if you keep going that long. You can do a half marathon from about here to opposite Canary Wharf. You turn around and come back. And so it happened the other Saturday, I ran along that way, and I stopped to reflect. In actual fact, as conning myself, I stopped to recover because I just couldn't go any further. And you look at Canary Wharf, and I thought again, without it being disparaging of any of the wonderful people who work in those banks and institutions, the people that cheated on LIBOR, their problem wasn't that they didn't have A stars to C's in maths and English. The problem wasn't that they didn't get into the best universities. The problem wasn't that their parents couldn't pay for the best education. It was just that that education was lopsided and hopeless, and has left them in a place that they never dreamt that they'd get to. So the spiritual and the moral and the social and the social and the cultural are strands that become strands of the narrative that we all live in. And the narrative, as you know, of the story, the narrative or story that we all live in is the most important. It's the roots, it's the foundation. These things are the roots of who we are. They matter more than anything. Oasis schools and Oasis work, generally we do lots else besides schools, is based around 3 C's. There's always C's to do with education, as Jim said, for some reason. And we always talk about character and competency and community. It's not that you can get competent, and when you're competent, you really ought to do a bit of character, and a bit of community will really help you. It's actually these things fit together, and they form the narrative in which we live. And as we all know, the narrative in which we live becomes the lenses through which we see the whole of life. And all of our actions and all of our responses are actually prodded and conditioned by the way we see stuff and the stuff we can't see. The narrative we live in, the spiritual education, the moral education, the emotional education, the cultural story in which we're raised and rooted really matters. Of course, we know for a long time, if you want to be a great footballer, kick a ball every day. Ask David Beckham. You just got to go back and back and back, and you've got to loop that ball over that ball over that wall. If you want to be a great mathematician, don't hang about for the maths lesson to turn up every few days. Kind of do your maths every day. If you want to be a zoologist, get on the internet and find out about it. Use your brain, explore every day. Actually, growing into being the people that we want to be, rooted spiritually and morally and socially, that means that we need to work at these things every day. We know so much about neuroscience now, don't we? And there was this famous thing that was done with London taxi drivers, as you well know, and you know their brains grow in a different shape just because they have to use spatial awareness in a way that none of the rest of us have to do. But once they stop being taxi drivers, I'm sure you read all of this, that brain shrinks back, because our brain is a muscle just like any other muscle in our arms and legs. We use it and they flourish. We neglect them and we're lost. And so it is, I believe, that our inner story, because that's what all this is about, the spiritual, moral and social, the cultural, is all about the inner story, the narrative by which I live. It's what I see when I'm looking at you. It's what I hear when I'm talking with you. It's about the whole way we interact. It's, as Jim said, about being people in community together. When I was a kid, grew up in London, my dad used to work for British Rail, and my dad, I'm half Indian, half English, and my dad is the Indian half, and he came to this country at a time when that was very hard for someone who was very dark-skinned. But he eventually got a job with British Rail. He was a ticket collector, but that meant that we got 4 free tickets a year. And we never went away on holiday, but we used to, in the summer, we used to go down to Brighton, because it was the kind of closest place from Croydon. We used to get on the train at Croydon and trundle all the way down to Brighton for the day and spend the day on the pier and come back. And I've got a brother and 2 sisters, and we loved, the highlight of the day was we'd have fish and chips, and then we'd be given a stick of Brighton Rock. Brighton Rock's an extraordinary thing, besides the fact that it rots your teeth out. It says Brighton all the way through. The thing about life is this. I say to our staff all the time, but really I should say it to myself. You know, when we get caught in a corner and we've had a hard day, it's been a long day and it's a tired day and we've had a hard month and things have gone bad and we've heard the bad news about this and that and everything, and then we get cornered by someone and we send that unkind email, or we respond in an unkind way, or we act selfishly or whatever. Then we say, oh, do you know, I was caught off balance, I was caught off guard. Actually, it's that's moments we all realise, don't we, that our real self leaks out. You know, all the rest of my life I'm kind of in control. Whatever I'm thinking, I can cover it up. I can act kind. I can act generous. I can act. I can act selflessly, but it's an act. It's when I'm really in a corner, or when I really want something, that who I am bubbles out. That's why this education is so important. For if we're going to rebuild a narrative of community in our nation, and if we're going to build a global narrative of community, and if we're going to become the best versions of ourselves, if we're going to build a society that we want to leave to anyone else, if we're going to build real security, it's about the spiritual and moral and social and cultural development of human beings in community. Without that, we're lost. I got a chance, just to close with, I got a chance some years ago to go and live on a Navajo Indian reservation in the States for a week. I was speaking at a conference for them, and they said, come live with us, which was an extraordinary experience for endless reasons that I cannot tell you about now. But it was then that I heard this story that I've read from time to time since. As I sat in the town, the village square, talking to the elder, he told this story. I've seen it in the press once or twice since. He said, an old man sat with his grandson, and the grandson said to the grandfather, what can I learn from you? And the old man said, what you can learn is this. Inside us all, each one of us has two wolves, the wolf being pretty central to the Native American story. And the grandson said, we both have two wolves. The old man said, yes. What are the wolves? What are their names? The old man said, well, the first wolf is called anger. The first wolf is called pride. The first wolf is called self-centeredness. The first wolf is called lack of control. The first wolf is called closed fist. Well, said the young grandson, what's the second wolf called? The second wolf is called kind, said the old man. The second wolf is called generous. The second wolf is called humility. The second wolf is called compassion. The second wolf is called the open hand. The young man thought about it, and then he said to his grandfather, Grandfather, if these two wolves are inside us and they fight, which one wins? The grandfather said, the one we choose to feed. That's why this quality mark is so important. That's why spiritual, moral, social, cultural development is central to who we are as a nation and as humanity. That's why I'm so pleased to be here this afternoon. Thank you.